FIers, welcome back to another episode of Retirement Police Most Wanted. In today's episode, we discuss our two-part FI number, our financial independence number, and share where we are at in that journey now that we are 99 months away in our 100-month countdown to financial independence. Stick with us as we reveal all the details as we go on the lam from the retirement police and become most wanted. My fellow FIers, I hope you're doing well. Just wanted to give you a sense. Our previous episode, we had discussed our unconventional, unique to us, what we are calling our two-part FI number, our financial independence number. If you haven't listened to the episode, go back and check out that episode number 3. And again, I should state for the record a disclaimer here. What is discussed on this show is not intended to be investment or life advice. You should consult your legal, financial, accounting, spiritual coaches, life coaches, any of those specialists in your life to provide insight on your personal, your specific circumstances, because each situation is unique. And so what is being discussed here is purely for entertainment. It is to help provide insight on our 100-month journey. I thought it would be helpful to, when I say that we have this two-part strategy, to help you better understand where we're at in terms of our baseline right now. The part 1 is from age 59 and a half to age 65. So that money is money that we basically in cash-like accounts. We are not planning for that there would be any growth in those accounts. It would be as we are withdrawing those funds or using those funds, we are not planning on any growth. I know that's insane, but for us, it just makes the math simpler. It's certainly not eloquent. Within our FI number for our part 1 strategy, if you don't know what an FI number is, FI number, your financial independence number, people may confuse this with how much you collectively earn a year, either individually, through your job, other sources of income, dividends, whatever it may be, your side hustles, or as a couple, a family. Family FI is where we have been at. Our approach has probably been a little slower than most. You still can definitely achieve financial independence while having kids. I know that some people wonder if that's possible. It's definitely possible. Just planning, and it's always making choices, as is the whole concept of financial independence. The FI number is what you need to live on, and assuming that you're only going to live on, say, 4%, the 4% rule. Now, I know that Bill Bengen, who invented the 4% rule, which means, let's say you have $1 million. The assumption is that that money earns a good enough return that if you withdraw 4%, in the case of $1 million, that would be $40,000 annually that you'd be withdrawing. You take out that $40,000, but given the historical performance of the stock market and the bond market, in theory, you should be able to recoup the $40,000 that you've taken out. And it's this perpetual money-making machine that sustains you such that you would not run out of money. At the end of life, your expenses may get a little higher there, but again, in theory, you would not have to worry about finances ever again. In our case, we're looking at the strategy of our part 1, 59 and a half to age 65. And I wanted to just give you a sense of where we are. We have a range in that, a very low end range, what some would probably call lean fire. Our FI number is still in debate here, what it is, but it's sort of our best guess at a lean number for us, and then a number that allows us a little more ability to be financially independent and have a little more fun, which is what we would like to do. That is our goal. Previously, I've mentioned this is something, financial independence journey has been something that we've been on for a long time. We have traditionally been cognizant of, even before we would have classified it as financial independence, but we could tell you that we always wanted the freedom. And the couple of previous episodes, I encourage you to go back, hear a little bit more about how I viewed things even from very early on, probably like 4, 5, 6 years old in that era. In terms of our part 1 funds, we are at basically 70% as of right now. 100 months out, we have hit about 70% of our lean financial independence goal in terms of the part 1 ability to live a more robust lifestyle. We are at about 50% of the goal. And so I know that seems like, wow, you're really on target, which we are. We have 100 months to do this, and we should be right on pace to, at that high level, being at 50%. Or if you make the assumption that your money doubles approximately every 7 years, and that's just a quick shorthand. Again, there's no guarantees on that we would be able to hit that target, because 100 months is longer than 7 years. So there's even a little slight cushion in there. In terms of our part 2 funds, and these are, you have listened to the episode. If you haven't listened to episode 3, basically our part 2 funds are pre-tax or tax deferred retirement accounts. In our case, are also putting our Roth IRA accounts in there. We don't really factor Social Security funds in there, but if they would exist, even if they're at a lower level, that's where they would go in these part 2 funds. Social Security is not something that is part of our number. I want to clarify that our part 2 funds make no assumptions. Well, not no assumptions. Our part 2 funds, as we know it right now, assumes $0 from Social Security. And then we have, each of us, my spouse and I, had worked for a short period of time where you would actually receive some pension funds. And I know that seems really, in this era of 401k, 403b, it seems rather unlikely that most people mention pension payments, but these would be less than, for each of us, $100 a month. So not really something that we're factoring into they're not going to be a major contributor to our part 2 number. 100 months out, we are looking at about 75% of that, of our low end number. We don't factor in the Social Security in terms of our part 2 number, but that part 2 number on the low end is I mean, really not even lean fire. It's skinny as a pea pod. I don't want to confuse anybody. It's like, wow, you're at 79% of your part 2 number. Wow, you should just retire today. Given our current lifestyle, it would be extremely difficult to live on that dollar amount for any extended period of time. And I don't think we'd want to do rice and beans and do not be able to. I like having goals set. You can see how quickly you can make progress. And I'm pretty competitive in nature. And then you're going to you meet that goal. And then what's the next goal and what's the next goal? So in terms of the part 2, when you're talking the higher, we would call it big fire. I know other people use another word. We didn't use that F word in our house to describe things or people. On the part 2, we're only at 43% of the goal. This is for age 65 and beyond. So we would have more time, an additional 5.5 years, let's say, to dollar amount that we need in our part 2. You may say, hey, you didn't factor in Social Security whatsoever, and Social Security is going to give you a bump up, and that very well could be true. It's just there isn't a certainty about what the federal government, how a future president and Congress is going to look and deal with the issue of Social Security. And at some point, they will have to deal with it. But we don't want to factor in a percentage or a dollar amount that may be significantly adjusted. So at this point, we just think it's better not to factor Social Security in whatsoever. There is Social Security. If Social Security is just like getting a cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, a super bonus. I just wanted to give you an understanding of where we are at this time in terms of those 2 numbers. The other thing in terms of Social Security, and I just want to dwell on this for another moment or 2, is that we have not decided, assuming Social Security is as we know it today, whether we'd want to take that early at age 62, as we know it, as of today. Early Social Security benefits can begin at the age of 62. That may not hold if Congress decides to make changes to the program. Or we may decide we're going to wait till age 67 and receive our full benefits. Or do we want to wait till the age of 70 and do the delayed benefits? If you want to check into this further, you can go to, I think it's www.ssa.gov, and there's a calculator there that you can go on and set up an account and play around with what your Social Security estimates would be, all under the way that the program is currently structured. But as we understand it, if you take the benefits early at age 62, there is a significant reduction in your benefits for the rest of your lifetime. If you wait till full retirement age, that would be 67 for us in the current scheme of things, regular benefits. And then if you decide, nope, I would rather completely delay my Social Security benefits until age 70, you get a bump up in your monthly benefits. And we are not sure what scenario, mathematically, factoring in our health, a variety of factors what's going to be the most advantageous. We are also assuming we will truly be retired, that we will make paid work optional. But we know that we like to work. We are workaholics, and that we like to volunteer to do things. So again, it might be strictly paid work optional, but call the retirement police on us if we're doing something part-time, or even if something so enticing comes along that we go back and say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I just can't believe that I'd pass this up, and I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go work. And so that would impact certain penalties, or you completely cancel out your Social Security benefits if you earn over a certain amount and you're taking Social Security. So it's like, bother doing it. Again, I would encourage you to go visit the www.ssa.gov site and play around with their calculators, and there's a lot of good information on there. I guess the other thing that I would share is I have always liked doing a lot of math, but I'm not a spreadsheet person. Literally like to do it old school, pen and paper, use my calculator. I typically will check the retirement accounts quarterly and then see where we are in relation to the target, and then once a year check in and see if we're where we need to be at. And that just, one, helps motivate me because I see that we've been able to hit the targets for the most part. The past couple of years, there were some really interesting things that happened in there, right? With COVID, very interesting times in there. And so if we had been actually retired at that time, I'm sure I would have massively freaked out about it. Knowing that we were going to be in the market over the long haul, and we consistently invest month after month after month in our tax-deferred retirement accounts through our employers, I didn't sweat it all that much. That being said, it took a while for us to get those gains back. And even though the past several years, the market took us a long time to get back to those levels. I am not somebody that's going to jump in and jump out of the market. Don't think I am savvy enough to be able to time the market. Flip side, I will say, using my parents as an example, who, if you, in a previous episode, I discussed their situation, so go back and listen to that. They were getting close to retirement, and they knew that they had enough money in that account. They were doing really well, especially. My parents probably lived on slightly more than half of what my father's income was. They were, in the words of Thomas Stanley and William Danko, the authors of The Millionaire Next Door, which is a great book, they would have been prodigious accumulators of wealth, or PAWs. They had enough money to basically draw down, maybe not exactly the 4% rule. Very risk averse. If you have ever done one of those tests, look at what is your risk tolerance. Are you willing to put 100% of your retirement in equities? Do you want a mix, 50-50 mix? Do you want it all in cash like instruments? Do you want it in bonds? Making, again, no recommendation or no judgment on this. And they had probably at the time had about a 50-50 mix between equities and then more cash-like instruments. At that time, money markets were several percentage points rather than pennies on the dollar. And so this was all in their pre-tax retirement account that my father had. And they just said, okay, you're telling us we have enough. We met with one of the financial advisors. They said, yep, you're going to have enough. And they said, what if we just move it all to cash-like instruments within the retirement account? So they didn't pull any of the money out. So they didn't have any tax event that occurred as a result. And the financial advisor completely freaked out. There's no way you should do that because you're not going to get all the growth that you need. Essentially, a terrible idea. Brought in a second financial advisor, and that advisor was like, we don't advise you to do this, and thank you very much. And I was at the meeting with my father, and we went back and explained it to my mother. And they both said, yeah, but aren't they telling you that basically we can withdraw X amount of money, and then even at this lower growth rate, it will essentially be the same or close to the same dollar amount. And we have other money in post-tax money market accounts, certificates of deposit, savings accounts, and again with the caveat that all of those were paying more than pennies on the dollar at that time. And I said, yeah, that's true. And they said, all right, we'll shift it all out because for us, we know we have enough money to live on. We understand we're going to be foregoing massive growth of maybe a year where the stock market's on a tear and it does 15 to 20% growth. But on the flip side, we do not want to have the market go down. Just psychologically, will not be able to handle that. And we're not at ages where we can make those losses up. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for the vast majority of her life. She had worked enough during her younger years and for various periods, some part-time jobs and even some full-time jobs. So she met all of her qualifications to receive Social Security, didn't have the maximum of 35 years, but certainly exceeded at least the minimum qualifications of the 10 years or the 40 quarters. To them, it was not worth the risk. In the case of my parents, they would be receiving Social Security, and Social Security just about equaled, it was about half of what my father earned. So they could pretty much live on Social Security. They were not doing travel for a variety of reasons. So they were in their slow go or no go years. They weren't spending a lot of money except for healthcare related expenses. That was their biggest expense. So they just said, hey, just shift it all over into cash-like instruments within the retirement accounts. And that was about 12 to 18 months before the Great Recession hit. And while they did not achieve the gains of the subsequent years after the Great Recession, they did not have the massive financial losses that occurred in the market of the Great Recession. They had been in the market during Black Monday, the 1987 crash. They had been in the market for the dot-com bubble, though they wouldn't have bought individual stocks. They would have been in index funds. They had experienced losses over the course of their time, but they missed the Great Recession, and they were incredibly grateful about it. And they also they had no regrets about not jumping into the market during the Great Recession and riding some of those other highs. They continued until the very end to not exceed their spending targets, and they incredibly generous to their family as a result. They outlived their money. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I share that to say just some people, their risk tolerance are very different, and in the case of my parents, it happened to work out. We are continuing down our 100-month path here and trying to achieve these two different targets, our part 1 targets and our part 2 targets. Part of it is we know life is too short, and that's why we're very focused on both, but want to make sure that we're hitting the part 1 targets as quickly as we can here, so that we know if we want to modify how we approach things from a work perspective, that we will have options by the time we hit age 59 and a half. So with that, I will see my fellow FIers at a future date. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe and be good out there.